Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Rolka. I want to welcome you to this week's office hours. One of, I guess it's the only regularly scheduled live event I do, but I've now been doing another event of sorts to answer questions, which is singing questions answered. And you can check that out. That's sort of done on an as-needed basis, though I more or less do them on Tuesdays, though I missed this week. JC's Radiant Ray. Good welcome. It's like, I was trying to say good morning and welcome at the same time, and it ended up being good welcome. Welcome to you, good. Good morning, welcome. Morning. Good afternoon, good day from vocalists around the world. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the time each and every week. BRC Mono, hey, hello. That's I do not recognize your user ID. Welcome to this week's live event. This is the time I set aside every week to field questions live. Good afternoon to you. Chit chat a little bit, talk about music, talk about whatever, really. All that kind of good stuff. This is your live event. So please ask your questions if you like. Feel free to interact with those in the chat as well. If you use the @ symbol, then people scanning through, if you say like at JC's Radiant Ray, then JC's Radiant Ray will know to read that one. If there's no @ symbol, then I will assume it's directed at me and I will read it and go forth. Justine V, hey, reminding me of the Fonz. Oh, those happy days. Jürgen, from home finally. Fantastic. Let me see if I remember correctly. 2 weeks ago it was Czech Republic, right, Prague. And then last week, if I remember correctly, it was Berlin. And finally home. I imagine it's good to be back. I hope your tour went well. AJ, it's Jacob. It's been, meanwhile, not sure if you remember me anymore. I certainly remember the user ID. There's been a few Jacobs recently that have introduced themselves, and I have known. I'm not sure which one in particular you might be. I certainly recognize your user ID. Melinda, I'm getting over a cold that's causing swollen tonsils. Ouch. I don't believe my larynx. Maybe keep on going. Will hurt my voice if I say, oh. I think I'm missing one of those comments, Melinda, but singing while sick, I'm scheduled on the worship team at church this week. Okay, you need to be conscientious and careful about that. If you cannot vocalize over the secondo passaggio, it is my opinion that you should take vocal rest. If you have not seen your doctor or ENT, you might seriously consider, I guess it's Saturday now, so that could be tricky, but depending on where you are in the world, that might be possible, depending on what you got going on in the U.S., if you happen to be here in the U.S. But yeah, be very, very careful with that. At the very least, it may just delay the time it takes you to get back up to full speed, and that's just not going to help anybody, especially if you're regularly scheduled with your worship team. And furthermore, if you are not the only vocalist on the team, not to say that other instrumentalists shouldn't be considered as well, but if you've had a cold, don't spread your cold. Like your worship leader or your other vocalists on the team don't want your cold, and it could be very, very detrimental to what they're doing as well. But I would highly recommend you check with your doctor or ENT, especially if you've had tonsillitis. If you cannot vocalize over the secondo passaggio, again, it is my opinion that you do not sing. If you can vocalize over the secondo passaggio, you should still consider your doctor's recommendations, obviously. But also just proceed with caution. Maybe try and keep it out of the zona de passaggio and just keep it in a much more comfortable range of your voice. Heidi, hello, Heidi. Dance and music. Hello, Jeff. I love your classes. Thank you. I appreciate that. And welcome. I don't recall seeing your user ID here before. Welcome to the live event. Nathan, hello. Hello. Michael, good morning, good evening. Good morning to you too. The Sauce. Hi, Jeff. Just wanted to ask, how do I develop a natural vibrato without forcing it in the voice? A very good question. In some respects, I feel like your question sort of answers it it answers itself. Though I suppose you haven't actually stated what will help with that. Forcing a vibrato typically results in a vibrato that is largely more about moving. It's gross manipulation of the musculature around the larynx, vocal fold engagement, increase and decrease. And that, you can kind of sort of simulate a vibrato that way, but it ends up being very choppy. And a lot of the benefits that we get from a vibrato, it isn't that the vibrato itself creates the benefits, but the presence of vibrato in a singing voice is a good indication that it is well aligned and well balanced between vocal fold engagement and airflow. So the answer to your question is focus on balance of phonation with your voice. What does that mean? That means making sure that you have good natural tone production, starting first in your normal thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice range, your chest voice, and then moving outwards from there, both into more of your lower voice range and then up to the zona de passaggio and over the secondo passaggio eventually. Vibrato is a good indication that you've got a well-balanced system. So you're using just the right airflow and just the right amount of vocal fold engagement. As such, there's actually very little in terms of instruction on a production of a vibrato. When you look through vocal study textbooks, a lot of the times the instructions on vibrato or the teaching methods on vibratos are perilously short, because we get a vibrato as a natural oscillation between the balance between vocal fold and subglottic air pressure when you have good alignment. So we focus on alignment, which is to say good airflow and good vocal fold engagement, and the vibrato will start to emerge. You'll start to feel it initially, like if you have no vibrato of any kind, that is a system that has too much vocal fold engagement. You're too tense around the larynx. So again, focus on airflow, focus on alignment, and you will, as those things balance out, you'll start to feel a little wobbliness. And this can be disconcerting because it can start to feel like, oh, I'm going to crack or I'm going to lose the note here. But just carry on with it, and you'll notice that wobbliness starts to oscillate a little bit, and you're starting to see the origins of your vibrato. You learn to lean into it a little bit, and that will widen it to a certain degree. In classical technique, when you get those like really wide operatica vibratos, which are only one step removed from what an actual trill in that technique is, once you get to the trill, you're allowing for a certain amount of muscle engagement in order to create the trill, but by then you've got more than enough release to sustain the vibrato. So, sorry, that I went off a little bit on that one. That was kind of a long-winded answer, but basically focus on balance. You can start that practice with short notes, depending on where you are in your vocal training. Maybe you can immediately proceed into exercises where you're doing like a he. Exercises like that, which there's a couple instances of that on my channel. And it's a really great balancing exercise that also lets you dive into a melismatic phrase and gives you a feeling of what it's like to sing with that balance in your voice. Sleepwalker, hello. Justine, if I've smoked for like years, is my voice recoverable? Well, the body has a remarkable ability to heal itself. By the way that you've articulated your question, it may sound as if you've quit smoking, which I think is a very good thing, and I congratulate you on that. If it's something you're considering, I think from an overall health perspective, that's probably advisable. Again, I would talk to your doctor about it, and you may need to see what the situation is with your larynx and things like that. Most of the people that I know who have smoked, in the immediate aftermath of quitting, they will notice a fairly dramatic shift. This will likely occur in the transition area of your voice. So your chest voice will probably remain more or less the same, but you'll start to have more access to your zona de passaggio and secondo passaggio. But beyond that, it's hard for me to say, and I imagine depends a lot on your own individual circumstances, which your doctor or ENT would be able to speak to more directly. Hey, low, low, low. Ronaldo, hi, Maestro. Have a nice weekend. Thank you. You too. Melinda, I read that. Martin, hello. Dance and music can please post breathing exercises. There are many already on the channel, but I think I'm kind of overdue for one. So thank you for reminding me. I will make sure to do that soon. Hi, John Smith. Dewan, and being singer for your teaching. Wonderful. Wonderful, I think. Thank you for watching. BRC Mono, I have a question. I listen to your warm-up every day and exercise my voice, so your voice speaks to my morning soul. I'm an amateur pianist and singer. I only play for myself. Do you recommend a book for singing and playing warm-up? I would like to warm up both my fingers and voice at the same time. You know what? I've got something that I can give to you. It was taken from a workshop that I did a couple years ago, and it was focused primarily on coordination of vocalization and accompaniment. So the exercises begin rather they're very easy for starters. Just simple harmonizations where you might sing like let me do that in this key. Just 1-5-1, doing that sort of thing. It starts off with stuff like that and then gets much more challenging. The best thing would be if you could send an email to me through jeffrolka.com, the connect page there. Send an email and I'll send it over to you. I'll explain to you, how it works in the email, and I think it'll be fairly self-explanatory once you have a look at it. The bridge. What is a good exercise for vocal flexibility? Coloratura. Well, I suppose there are some exercises which are perhaps somewhat more focused on what one thinks of when they think of flexibility and what a coloratura soprano would be doing. But the fact of the matter is that if we're working towards really even, balanced phonation throughout the various registers of our voice, then we are in fact developing the skills that are required to be agile as a vocalist. There are a few videos on my channel that are focused primarily on agility. In fact, I just released an agility-focused daily warm-up last month. I'd have a look at those and see what you think. I would also recommend, I'm really, really fond of this warm-up. It's the diaphragmatic breathing warm-up. It's generically done for male and female vocals. One might really read low and high registers into that. That being said, the male one I think does go to A above middle C or something to that effect. So, mostly it's going to be male vocalists that are going to work on that, and does go much lower than that. Anyways, that one I'm very, very fond of because I really, really, it was done by request to satisfy the idea of blending engagement or airflow exercises into the vocalizations in such a way as to promote balance and agility. So I think it's particularly appropriate for your question, in addition to the ones that are just purely about agility. Jürgen, this time I'd like to ask a question. Brilliant. Does singing fast make you go tired quicker too? We did some R&R tunes like Little Richard, cool. First verse of Long Tall Sally, I was dead tired. That's an interesting question. I don't know that the actual speed of vocalization necessarily makes you tired, but in a tune like that, there's so the depending on what key you did it in, if you did it more or less true to form, the way that Little Richard would have done it, then you're maintaining a fairly high tessitura, and it's just relentless. Like the tune just keeps going and going and going, and there's very little time to catch a breath. And sustaining that level of engagement in order to maintain good tone quality, good singing at that register takes a ton of energy. So it's not the tempo necessarily, it's the tessitura and the presence or lack thereof of any room to catch a break in the middle of the tune. You're welcome, Melinda. AJ Vasquez, it's okay. Happy to be back, though. I have a question. What are some warm-ups I can use to warm up a choir when it doesn't take up so much time? Ooh, interesting question. Well, one, I would, so first thought here is I would pitch it so that I'm assuming that you have a mixed choir, so both male and female vocalists. I would pitch the exercises so that everyone can sing all at the same time. And so like that's like for root position stuff, think like E flat, E, F, F sharp, G, A flat. And now we're starting to get into, depending on what range your tenors go to, maybe, but then the baritones are going to be in trouble. They're going to have to skip down an octave. But yeah, like that's probably a good place to start. And I would do exercises like I just sang a moment ago. Run them through A, run them through that, and then take them back and say, okay, everybody, E, A, E, A, and then take it back down again, and then, just rotate them through. I think that the important thing is to rotate through at least the 5 cardinal vowels, E, A, A, O, and U. I would do it in quick succession. You might also consider alternating your starting point to get everyone's ears charged up. So maybe, you do that, and then also do maybe like E, A, A, E, A, A. Stuff like that. It will just, I think those kinds of general vocalizations that everyone can do are going to get everyone charged up. It's going to keep them singing, which I think is the most important part, and make it so that you only explain it once, and you tell everybody, okay, just stick to an octave that's comfortable. And and you can say too, like, sopranos, mezzos, maybe altos too, tenors, baritones. Play your starting pitches and you're off to the races. And basically, in general, and I'm assuming you can play piano. In general, I would stick to the 5 first notes of the major scale and then figure out some patterns. If you've got some repertoire that has lots of jumps and skips in it, then maybe work in, stuff where they're going like 1, 5, 1, E, A, and get them skipping around a little bit too. That'll charge up their ears as well. Okay, right. Jürgen, I am planning to do some Amazon purchases. Remind me, how do I do that to support your channel? Thank you for asking. All of the links for that sort of stuff are in the description of this video. Basically, I via my like Amazon chose me as like an influencer, which is I really don't like that name, but in any way, basically, it makes me an affiliate of Amazon. So there are all sorts of links in the description. And if you, ideally, if you'd clicked and bookmarked the link that was appropriate for your country, there's like half a dozen of them. If you click and bookmark it, then every time you go to Amazon.com, whatever, Amazon. Wherever you happen to be, And unfortunately, it's not available in all countries. But what happens is that everything will be absolutely identical as it always was. It won't cost you anything, but because you're going to Amazon via one of my affiliate links, they take it as a referral. And so basically they give me a small percentage of whatever it is you're purchasing as a referral, and it comes back to support my channel. And it's greatly appreciated. Again, it's sort of it's one of those things where it doesn't cost you anything more than you were already going to spend, and it absolutely benefits the channel and really helps me quite a lot. So that's how that works. Thank you. If you need any help, send me an email. I'll figure it out. Hi, Rolka. Is there a way to make my head voice more full sounding than it already is? Yes. Balance. Now, usually, it depends on where you're at already. If you're in the early stages and you're approaching this, making a reasonably good transition over the secondo passaggio, then it may be that your head voice is a little bit like dull sounding is the way it usually turns out. You can hear me enter and come out of the head voice, right? And what we're looking for is to get that to match more. And in order to do that, we have to have a good balance of vocal fold engagement and breath energy. And the long and the short of it is, if you've got that hollow sound, then you're on the right track. Keep practicing and keep paying attention to the engagement and expansion of your rib cage so that you maintain really, really good subglottic air pressure. It has to increase as we ascend. If you don't have that sound, but maybe it's airy, and you're losing a lot of air, then the vocal fold is separating, abducting, abducting, sorry. And in that case, you're not actually entering the cricothyroid dominant singing voice or head voice in a way that's going to develop into a consistent tone or get fuller. So the first step there is to get proper adduction of the vocal fold. I mentioned that I was really excited last week, and I was working on something. Last week, I began production on what is going to become the next step beyond the AAA method. The AAA method is the free vocal method that is on my website. If you haven't checked it out, it was meant to be a step-by-step method to evaluate and work on the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice, so your chest voice. Nothing in it. It was never, the technique in that section is not in any way meant to extend into the upper register or beyond the secondo passaggio of any given FOC. The course that I started producing last week it's the next segment. And you might consider checking into it once it's released. I shot 260 videos last weekend. It was like all I did. And this week I've been working on resource files so that basically I want people who use the method to be able to practice with the video content, come to an understanding of what's supposed to be happening, and then if they prefer to, be able to work offline with resource files like MP3s and things like that I'll be providing as well. It'll also come with like a bunch of PDFs, and it's all step by step, but there's also a whole lecture series that it will go through as well. I'm not sure how long it's all going to be. I think the video content alone ended up being like 4 or 5 hours or something like that, but it has to be more than that. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Anyways, that will be something that perhaps would be very helpful too. In the meantime, while that's still in production, you could also check into how to sing high notes parts 1, 2, and 3. The technique is there as well. It's a little bit more truncated. this is the method that I started shooting last weekend is very, shall we say, disciplined in its approach to smoothing through the secondo passaggio. It's very, very linear and granular. Just takes very, very small steps, but inexorably towards a smooth transition. You're very welcome, Karina. Greg, long time no see. Indeed. How's everything going? Things are going great. You've probably already heard a bunch of stuff. I've got my new thing coming out. I don't talk about this too much because I don't feel like it's necessarily germane to our discussion here, but I actually started tracking a new song I'm going to be releasing pretty soon. I'm really, really excited. Nathan, best songs, keys for tenors. An interesting question. Assuming that most tenors have their secondo passaggio around F sharp above middle C, unless you're talking about opera repertoire, which I would have to look at to really, Caro mio bien immediately. I was going to say I need to think about it for a while, but everyone loves that song. But you can sing that song in any key. It's not the repertoire, and it's not even really the key. It's the way that the melody and the key are aligned. So let's say you're singing a ballad, and the whole melody, the whole ballad, it all builds up towards ending on the tonic, and it's the only time you sing the tonic above the rest of the scale. So it would be like, all my melody is... And then finally, at the end of the song, it ends triumphantly there at the top of the scale that we've been using the whole time. Well, if it's a ballad and it's incredibly dramatic, then maybe having it in F sharp, or G is appropriate. But if it's not, then and you need consistent tone quality, in other words, you can't have a head voice affectation, then those probably maybe they're not the best keys. Maybe having it like around D or C is going to work better. You have to consider the melody, and I think the vibe of the piece that you're singing as well, because a lullaby that only spans a fifth, written in the key of C for a tenor, is probably not going to be good whether you sing it down the octave or up the octave. Up the octave, you have to cross the secondo passaggio. Down the octave, you're kind of getting into the bottom usable range of the tenor vocalist. So somewhere in that, probably E, F, depending on the tenor in question. This question comes up very frequently, and the answer remains, it's the integration of the melody and the vibe of the song that dictates the key. Yeah. I hope that helps. JC's Radiant Ray. Jeff, how did you learn to recognize pitches from different instruments? For me, voice and piano recognition seems fine, but acoustic and electric guitar are hard for me to key off of. Any tips? I sing it in my head is the short answer to that question. So, it took me a long time to figure that out. But yeah, if I need to do a transcription of some sort, I can oftentimes, I can do it without vocalizing it, but it goes at least half again as fast. It goes, it takes me about half the time, or less than half the time to do it. If I simply hum the melody, it doesn't really matter what octave it's in. I can move it from octave to octave. The pitches remain relatively consistent. It's the same melody, just displaced by an octave. So I just vocalize it and then play it on the piano or whatever. Guitar is fine too. Looking back on it now, I actually struggled in dictation course at university, and in those courses you must remain silent. You're not allowed an instrument, and you're not allowed to vocalize anything, and that really made it difficult for me. It's funny, I didn't really think about that. I hadn't really given that much thought, but now that I think about it, 20 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, that was probably part of the problem. That and I admit I did not practice dictation as much as would have been advisable when I was first studying it at university. I was more interested in practicing. Everson, I hope that answers your question, JC's Radiant Ray. Everson Jr., I have a well-developed head voice, but I can't apply it to a song because I can't connect with my chest voice. I can, but the break sounds really weak. Should I push? No. And I would argue that you actually don't have a well-developed head voice if you can't make a transition to your thyroid dominant singing voice. That's I suppose, but it developed. I mean, in my mind, the word developed would suggest usability, and here, except in certain cases where that disconnect is desirable, it's not particularly usable. You need to focus on the break. Focus on your transition through the secondo passaggio. It may be that the overall timbre of your cricothyroid dominant singing voice, your head voice, may slightly change as you work on that transition. But no, on the other hand, if it is in truth that well developed, let's just assume for a moment that it is, then the question becomes, the secondo passaggio can often sound in our heads quite weak, even long after it's become not noticeable to anyone outside of our person. And I wonder if you've recorded yourself recently, but not a song. Record yourself singing scales that specifically transit the secondo passaggio and evaluate it after you've had a chance to do that. Karina, I would like some suggestions for up-tempo pop songs that are good for examinations, but interesting. Ooh. That's an interesting question. I'm thinking back. See, when I was in England, I used to teach at 2 different facilities, and one of them was also a music store. And I would, in between lessons and stuff, I would often peruse through the books and stuff like that. And I remember seeing Rolling in the Deep in one of the, in the UK, they have these graded exams, 1 through 8, grade 8. Grade 8 being the highest level you can achieve of that before you head off to university or something. Or college. I guess you actually go to college. Actually, I think that you can study music at university as well. In any case, I think Rolling in the Deep was in there, but I don't know that I would really suggest that. I mean, it seems to me like it sticks too much to just one range. Up-tempo pop songs. I think it might just be because I saw the word up when I was reading your comment first, but immediately I started thinking of Uptown Girl by Billy Joel, which is really old and probably not appropriate, but, first thing comes to my mind. Thinking more recently, maybe something by Bruno Mars might be kind of fun, or maybe, but see, and then I think of like Happy by Pharrell, forgive me if I've mispronounced his name. That could be fun too, but again, like, actually, Happy does move around a little bit there in the chorus. That could be kind of cool. I don't know. I'd have to give it some more thought, Karina. JC's Radiant Ray at Greg's Life. At JC's Radiant Ray. You're very welcome, Justine. At Karina at Heidi. Cool. Yeah, I'll get an email from whoa. Dario. Hello, Maestro. Could you please... Hey, folks, by the way, I forgot to mention this. If I don't get to your question, please just pop it into the comments. If it's a slow day, then it's not a problem for me to get to everyone's comments. But if I don't get to your comment here in the live event, please put it into the comments of this video. Once it's done, YouTube will release it as a video, and I'll answer it shortly thereafter. Tom Waits' style of singing. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Okay, so Tom Waits, you know, there's only ever going to be one Tom Waits. And I'm reminded of Lemmy. I don't know if you know who Lemmy was. He died just a couple years ago. Lemmy was the lead singer, songwriter, I believe, as well, and bass player of the heavy metal band Motorhead, who also had a very distinctive vocal delivery. And Lemmy, and I am not in any way advocating this, I am not suggesting this, but Lemmy's, when asked about his vocal quality, he said that he was careful, or I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he said in order to have his vocal quality, he had to soak it in a liter of Jack Daniels every day. Now, I'm not, like I said, I would not advise you to do that. In fact, I would make great arguments against doing that very thing, which I think your doctor would also make good arguments against too. And I don't really know what Tom Waits' situation is, but in a character voice like that, where he's really just doing his own thing, it isn't as if vocal technique figures very prominently in what he's doing. It's more about creating that affectation. And it's quite likely that Tom Waits is one of few people who has the ability to do just that. Now, what I would recommend you do in that pursuit is make sure that you are very, very careful to maintain really, really good airflow and breath support, subglottic air pressure. We only want to use as much of the affectation as is absolutely necessary in order to get the affectation. Any more than that, and you start getting into problems with fatigue, and then other problems come out of the, recurring fatigue. So stay engaged, stay on your breath control as you experiment with different modes of phonation. With Tom Waits specifically, he has I haven't listened to a ton of Tom Waits music, and there's like a Boatman song that I'm thinking of where he's almost barking. Rah, 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 rah. It's that kind of a thing that's occurring frequently throughout the song. And in that, I'm using an awful lot of air, and I'm allowing the vocal fold to basically be as released as I possibly can. So you get a lot of that kind of, the outer surface of the area flapping around. A lot of air involved in that, and you want to make sure that you stay engaged so that you just keep yourself as healthy as you possibly can. Just use only as much of the affectation as is necessary. Yeah. That's in vocalists such as Mr. Waits. My question, of course, is why would you want to do that? I mean, I would be interested to hear more about that if you don't mind. I feel like we're kind of, it's not a particularly slow day, but maybe expound a little bit on that. I'm curious. At JC's Radiant Ray, Nathan, I have a request. Okay, is it possible if you could show me how well you can riff or run? Like what? I mean, I can do vocalizations. I would say that's a fair amount of agility. Probably could do a little bit better. I am in somewhat limited by my ability to play that pattern, but I could do it without playing it, I suppose, too. I don't know. What are you looking for? Heidi, thank you for all your videos. I use and recommend them all the time. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm having tongue tension, but only on high notes. Does that mean I'm singing too high for my voice type? Or do I just need to improve my breath support? Interesting. Interesting. Alice. Um, no, it doesn't necessarily mean you're singing too high. And it it might not even mean that you need to improve your breath support. If your tongue is tense, this is frequently because you have been, or we have been, I went through this too, that we are unconsciously trying to get the sound to be articulated by using muscular action around the larynx, including the tongue root. This is largely self-defeating because the tongue root doesn't really help with that too much. It helps with vowel formation in terms of its height in the rear of the oral cavity. But you haven't actually said what you're trying to do in general, so I'm assuming that. The thing is, there's a couple videos I've done on releasing tongue tension. There's some exercises in there to try out. The exercises will primarily make you aware of what's happening with your tongue. And then the process of releasing that tension can take a little bit of time and practice, but you can use those exercises. And I think in the video I mentioned, like, because like in one of the video I ask you to grab it, like to stick your tongue out, and grab it while you're singing. And sometimes it'll snake back in, you know. And you go to sing it contracts and pulls out of your fingers. And the practice is learn to keep it out. And over time, by learning to do something different with our tongues, we defeat that reflexive behavior of snaking it back. And that will help with your tongue tension. The sauce, you're welcome. Alexander, hi Jeff. Do you think practicing with karaoke tracks is a helpful form of practicing? Absolutely. Absolutely. Not everyone can play and sing or create their own karaoke tracks. And I think it's really, really great. It would be even better if you could do it without now you said karaoke tracks. I don't know if you mean like with a karaoke machine or like on YouTube where it'll still have the lyrics, but it would be better still if you did the karaoke track, pardon me, without the lyrics, so that way, you're holding yourself accountable to rhythm, as well as knowing the melody and knowing the pitches of the melody. But yeah, great stuff, man. Great stuff. AJ, you're welcome. The sauce. One further question, if you don't mind. Not at all. Can you ever be too young to start singing? I'm a 19-year-old tenor in classical choral training in order to sing repertoire like Bach, Handel. No, I don't think so. Some of the Wagnerian, well, now that I say that, typically male voices mature later. So the Baroque stuff is probably okay. I would put off working on Wagner for a while, probably. Particularly like the Tannhäuser and all that kind of stuff. I would just be patient in my development. At the age of 19, you've got some time. If you're a tenor, you're going to develop more quickly than the baritones and basses. It's true, but your soprano friends will beat you by quite a good margin to their kind of mature singing voices. So yeah, I don't think certainly at 19 you're not too young to start singing. Yeah, that's about right. Basically, you've got some time before things are gonna really. I remember one vocalist at university used to joke around about how like he may as well have another career while his voice develops, because he was a lower voiced male vocalist, and he was like, yeah, it's I'm gonna be in my 40s when I'm really at my best. But that's You should beat that by a fair margin. The sauce, but my upper register. Oh, sorry, I didn't read the whole thing. My upper register, A, B flat, isn't as consistent as the older tenors. Is my voice? Well, okay, yeah. So I kind of answered your question before I read the rest of it. Well, thank you, Justine. I really appreciate that. I'm trying to see if there's a hidden code in all these capitals. C, N, W, M, D, D, Y, U, O, H. If there is, it's lost on me. But thank you. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Denisha Downing 708. I really, really appreciate it. Hello, Dawn from Bay Farm Island. You talk often about major second above secondo passaggio. Can you explain how to find the secondo passaggio? Absolutely. I work on narrowing down. I work on finding the secondo passaggio by approaching it both from the bottom and the top. So step one, align vowels in thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice. That's my chest voice. Those vowels sound basically the same. You just hear the vowel changing. We move on, okay? Moving into the zona di passaggio from below, but usually done in reverse. So what we'll start off with is and then we ascend a little bit more. And we work that process down. Start a half step higher, work our way down. Half step higher, work our way down. Working through various vowels. I find it to be important to get A and Ah into play. So A and Ah have to be aligned. In other words, we get good, consistent tone. Because they both are, A is a nice narrow vowel, but it's not so narrow as E, so it tends to stimulate airflow, and Ah is quite open, which makes it a bit more fluid across the secondo passaggio in the early stages of it. But if you're getting into a falsetto tone production, it becomes very problematic. Meanwhile, we start these exercises, and you have to make a bit of an educated guess about this to start, and then you listen to the vocalist or you listen to yourself and determine whether or not you're actually in the right space. The idea here is to skip over the secondo passaggio. So for like my voice, this is a pretty good key. You. Definitively over the secondo passaggio, definitively under. You. And then we work our way down. You. In a new vocalist, you. And I know I faked that to try to give you an example, but it's not exactly as it would sound for someone who hasn't yet really determined where their secondo passaggio is. But when you're on the secondo passaggio doing those exercises in the early stages of development, that's like where you'll get the cracks. If they can establish good cricothyroid dominant singing voice above, they'll get that nice, hollow sound, that open woo kind of a sound. And then they'll be able to recreate the thyroarytenoid you on the bottom. But when you finally get the top note to be at the secondo passaggio, it will obviously be overbalanced. So leave yourself a little bit of a margin. Don't worry about that right in the beginning. And then you narrow the intervals slowly over time. And it takes some listening. It takes some internal kind of awareness of what things feel like to know whether you're squeezing or if you're pulling it down. We don't want either of those two things. We want to find the most natural point of transition so that we never feel like we're pushing up, we never feel like we're pulling down. Once you've identified that point, then you can very quickly figure out what a major second above it is. So like for myself, that point is F sharp above middle C. So I know that if I want to belt something over a G sharp above middle C, I don't want to do it too frequently. Once in a great while, if it's really justified. But like that just, mostly I sing music that I write myself. So I don't write it with the idea that I'm going to ask myself to do that. It's not really my thing anyway, to belt at that tessitura. The major second recommendation is to avoid undue fatigue and overuse injuries with the voice that can lead to more complicated problems later on. So I hope that explains that process. That's a fairly protracted means of describing it, but that's how I identify secondo passaggios in the people that I work with, is a reductive process of going above, approaching from below, always with a mind of like maintaining good vowel alignment, particularly on the ascending exercises, because that's going to facilitate access to the secondo passaggio in a scale-wise pattern. And that ultimately will lead to really, really beautifully consistent phonation across that transition point. Dawn, I know my soprano-ish, I've really got to make sure I read all the way through. I know my soprano-ish voice breaks C4, D4, and then F4, G4, and then F sharp 5-ish. Which one, if any of these, is the secondo one, which is the primo? Okay. F sharp 5 would be the secondo passaggio. The soprano range vocalists have this is actually something that I was talking about in the videos that I was cutting for the course this weekend. This is one of those differences between male and female vocalists. In the female voice, the primo passaggio can be much, much lower than in relationship to the secondo passaggio than the male vocal. In both tenor and baritone registration events, the primo passaggio and secondo passaggio is separated by a perfect fourth. So my primo passaggio, C sharp 4, secondo passaggio, F sharp 4. And you'll find that in almost every male vocalist, it will be that case. You'll get many male vocalists that claim it's different. When you start to get into it and really get their vowel alignment working and get them to quit straining to sing high notes, then you can actually find that it ends up being the case anyways. Female vocalists, it's not the same. There is your primo passaggio. The weird thing about this, which I find somewhat, I would have to look at like oscilloscope. I would have to look at the vibrational patterns of the vocal fold as shown in the oscilloscope pictures to be able to talk more in depth about this. But the primo passaggio is like I said, almost an octave below the secondo passaggio, but there's an additional sort of transitional zone that happens a perfect fourth below the secondo passaggio in female voices. But it's not as significant as the primo passaggio in the male vocal. So that's why they list it that way. It is that reason too why in female vocals often bringing the cricothyroid dominant singing voice lower and lower and lower it can be an acceptable technique. The danger there is that the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice doesn't fully develop until much, much later. Lillian, hello from Canada. My sister and I'm going to read all of this one. Lillian. Whoa. Wow, I quickly got really far behind. Oh, you're just saying my sister and I. Sorry. Thank you, Lillian. Thank you for jumping in today. I don't recall seeing your USRD. Welcome. Karina, I need more accuracy in keeping time. What kind of exercises should I do to improve that? Should I just listen to the original artist singing and reading the score at the same time? I would take a more active approach to that, Karina, and actually I would start counting and subdividing. So, maybe It's not it you know you could start this by doing a rhythmic analysis of the pieces that you're working on. So writing in the counts and offbeats and looking at that, and then learning to count it in real time with the original artist, and then learning to count it when you yourself are singing along with your accompanimental tracks without the benefit of the guide track. That would be a way to really start to improve your rhythmical accuracy. You're welcome, JC's Radiant Ray. Sir Marcus, hi, Jeff. Should singing be physically tiring to any muscles outside the larynx? Absolutely. I don't feel much in, say, my abs, but I hear many people say breath support is tiring. Am I doing something wrong? I don't know if you're doing something wrong or not, but I can say that it's the engagement that we feel in the torso of our bodies is a persistent kind of engagement. So it's not like, getting a gut punch or something like that, but it takes a lot of energy to maintain that expanded state and maintain engagement at the abdominal muscles. If you're feeling tired in your larynx, then you're probably not maintaining enough subglottic air pressure. You're not maintaining enough engagement in the torso muscles, and that's what's tiring out the muscles around your larynx. So yeah, it's a different kind of tired, but it is tiring. It takes a ton of energy. I'm taking my grade 8 exam this summer if all things go right. Good stuff. I like Uptown Girl, but this is a song for guys to sing. Yeah, I can dig that. I can do that. Like I said, Karina, I don't know. I have to think about that a little bit. But like I said, Bruno Mars, maybe, I don't know. You said pop. So personally, I really like a lot of Katy Perry's music. I find it to be, honestly, I find it very touching. Like, it's really kind of exciting, inspiring, tunes. Maybe look at some of that. Who else was I thinking of? Yeah. Oh, you're asking, is it a guy's song? I don't worry about that stuff too much, but I understand if you do. It's, I think, acceptable to change some of those lyrics. The thing about Uptown Girl that I almost hesitated to articulate it because it's so dated. The lyrics are kind of reflective of a different time, and it makes me feel a bit weird to talk about the song. But I guess I shouldn't feel too bad I didn't write it. But that's no excuse. Anyways, maybe, I don't know. Should only a fast tempo song count as up tempo? Well, up tempo is another way of saying fast. I suppose it is possible to have a song which the tempo is actually slow, but the beat is highly subdivided. But those tend to sound more improvisational, more like ballads and things like that. You've got a lot of different things happening. Thank you very much, V Mono. I really appreciate that. Dylan Klein Music. When singing outside using a PA, would you recommend using any reverb on vocals, or would you go for a more dry sound? I have a feeling it depends. Less reflections equal more reverb. Exactly. If you've got buildings on both sides of you, then you can probably do without it. If you are at a market and you're just standing on a street and there's nothing else around you, then probably a little reverb would be a nice little add-on. I kind of always had a little bit of reverb on things when I was doing those kinds of outdoor farmers market gigs and things like that. It just, if for no other reason, is because I normally had my PA behind me so that it was also functioning as a monitor. And it's nice to hear your own voice with a little bit of space around it rather than coming dry out of a speaker system, especially when you're close miking with a stage mic. So yeah, I'd say probably in general a little bit of reverb, but if you're in a really severe environment, in a box, boxed in by hard surfaces above and on both sides of you, then maybe then really, really leave it off or only use a tiny, tiny amount. Meant the tune of Uptown Girl, not the time. Andrew Curry, I am sing G. Good. Karina, may I ask what kind of software I can use to transfer the songs from a karaoke app like Carafun to MP3, please? I used live piano accompaniment before, not MMO, so I am familiar with this. Depends on what format it's in the karaoke app. My suspicion is, you could very easily use Reaper to do that if you're familiar with Reaper. I love Reaper. I think it's great. I recently transitioned from Pro Tools to Reaper, and I am having a wonderful, wonderful time with it. It is extremely inexpensive, and they have an incredibly generous period that you can use it for. But in this scenario, I mean, unless you can drag and drop it, then you're going to be playing it into Reaper, which is fine. You just make sure you use a stereo 1/8 inch to, I guess if you're using the input on your computer, it'll be stereo 1/8 inch there too. If you're using an interface of sorts, make sure that you've got a breakout cable so that you're getting a full stereo field. I'm in the bathtub, so I keep on typing wrong. That's awesome. Karina, as far as I know, you are the first person to participate in this chat in the bathtub. That is really cool. Do not drop your device. Dario, as always, you give us good and practical advice. Thank you. I was studying Invitation to the Blues and Tom Waits. Thank you again, Meister. You're very welcome. Very, very welcome. Excellent, Alexander Smith, or at least without scrolling guided lyrics. Absolutely. Market Forces, do you have any advice for handling Younger Than Springtime? It is my new song I am learning for my singing lessons. Oh, cool. I would have to look at it, and I'd want to know what key and also what your FOC is. All of those things would impact on what to do about it. Also, I'm applying for the BBC Youth Choir. Congratulations in advance. May you do very well. Do you have any advice for someone going into choral singing? Focus on blend. Choral singing is not about having your optimized phonation. It's about blending. So you just got to keep your ear on your section leader. Keep your ear on your section leader. Divya, hello. Market Forces, thanks as always, Jeff. Thank you. It is very, very kind. Andrew, hey, I'm singing a song in Italian called Seven Crudel. Parts of the song consist of crescendos. How should I breathe before the crescendos? No differently than you normally do, just making sure that you're doing so at an appropriate time, phrase-wise in the music. Assuming that you're taking good breaths, your breath shouldn't be any different. You may, however, consider starting your tonal onset at a slightly lower volume level in order to make the most of your crescendo. Divya, what got me first interested in music and singing? When I was a very, very small child, I had 5 LPs of the Beatles from my mom, and I just would listen to them nonstop. I don't know that was what did it, because I seemed to be interested in it before I even started to listen to them, and much less what got me to ask for them in the first place, I suppose. But I really don't know. I mean, I don't remember a time when I wasn't interested in music, and I'd always wanted to be an astrophysicist, and even when I was like 11 or 12, I went to the college nearby to where I grew up to go and talk to a physicist and learn about what it was going to be like and all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't until one of my early music teachers said, "Jeff, don't ever be a musician," and then listed off of reasons why I should never do it. And then I had a remarkable change of opinion about what I was going to be in my life. So yeah, I don't know. I've always been fascinated by music. Maybe that music teacher saved me from something. I don't know. I think it would have been really cool. Why do tenors develop quicker than baritones? When does a woman's voice mature? What age? Sopranos can develop in their mid-20s. Tenors develop quicker than baritones. It's related to. I have to imagine it has something to do with the size of the instrument, quite frankly. I was just reading this recently in one of Richard Miller's books, and from the top down, they tend to develop slower. But I'd have to go back and look at that section that I was reading again to make sure that it's size related. But generally speaking, lower voices mature later on. Dawn, it is a little bit complicated. But you're very welcome for the answer. Is it possible to sing the same note, say G4 in chest, head, and falsetto? And if so, what exactly do we change anatomically? Ooh, that's okay. I gotta go because I've already gone later, but I'm gonna answer that and then I'm gonna say goodbye. Sorry about that. I know that the gurgling noises come through, but okay. So G4. All right, so in chest voice, that's belting, right? And I'll ascend and I'll belt to G. Hey! There's chest voice. Now, head voice. Hey! I'm making a smooth transition over the secondo passaggio, and then I'm making a smooth transition back. That's head voice. Falsetto. You're going to really hear the change here because the vocal fold's going to abduct. And when it separates like that, you lose a ton of air. So I couldn't make it back down. So what are we changing anatomically? Okay, in the chest voice one where I'm belting, we're not changing. We are maintaining thyroarytenoid dominant. We are maintaining thyroarytenoid dominance in the singing voice. So I am not allowing the cricothyroid muscles to elongate the vocal fold. So I'm increasing breath energy, and I'm also increasing vocal fold engagement to maintain the thyroarytenoid musculature dominance. Right? When I make this change to head voice, I am allowing my cricothyroid muscles to elongate the vocal fold, and they become cricothyroid dominant. So there's a transition of energy from thyroarytenoid dominance to cricothyroid dominance and back. Falsetto, I'm increasing engagement around the thyroarytenoid muscles, and the vocal folds are abducting or separating. The previous two examples, the vocal fold is remaining adducted, A-D-D-U-C-T-E-D, I think, closed in the common parlance. And we get that separation where we lose a lot of air. That's the difference, anatomically and singing-wise. Great live event, everybody. Thank you so much. I do apologize. I know I didn't get to, I think I've got probably a bunch of stuff. Please just pop those in the comments. I will answer them. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing. I will see you again. Thank you. Bye.